Welcome to Unboxing, Play and Profit for the Gaming Curious. I'm Lane Nooney.
And I'm Joost van Dreunen.
And we're here digging deep on why games matter in today's economy. On the docket today, Friday, September 5th, back to school, and your co-hosts are loaded up with syllabi, survey links, and way too many Google Docs. We're kicking off the semester by revealing what actually made it onto our fall course rosters, plus what we'll be grilling our students about in this year's gameplay habit survey. Are the kids all right? We aim to find out. All that and more with your two very prepared co-hosts. But first, we've got some catching up to do. How are you? How is this
Great.
back to school season?
It's, as a parent, it is a blessing.
Are
Good
your
Lord.
kids starting? I thought school here started on Thursday.
The little one is having her sort of pre-trial today. It's like a 2-hour afternoon warm-up sesh.
For kindergarten or
Pre-K.
pre-K?
Pre-K. And the big one starts tomorrow, 8:20 a.m. Bye-bye.
That's so early. They have to be there like in the classroom. It's crazy to me that I used to get up every day at like 7:30.
What was your commute like when you were like 12 or 14?
My high school was like maybe half a mile from where my parents' house was, so I would often just walk in the morning. It was kind of
Nice.
Sometimes I'd get driven, but honestly, I just preferred to not have to be in the company of my parents. So I would just put on I remember this so distinctly. I would take my Walkman and I would put on my Star Wars audio tape soundtrack and I would walk to school, or my Classical Thunder cassette collection. Those were the two that I really liked.
Like you're just marching into like middle school.
I'm just listening to fucking Rossini. Yeah. Or the, I actually do know all the words to that weird segment, the 3D animated segment from Return of the Jedi, that song they added, like from Jabba's palace, because I listened to it so many times.
We talked about musical theater before, but that's, I guess, Star Wars is your musical theater.
It's a very deep cut. Yeah. I didn't discover it until I was a teenager.
Huh.
So.
That's wild. So, yeah, I, as a proper Dutch boy, had to bike to school, which by high school, that meant like a half-hour ride that started at 7:30 a.m.
Cool.
to get to school for 8:10. And it's best when it rains in the morning because then your clothes are wet the whole day. It's so good. So it's just like, so we moved in Brooklyn to accommodate exactly what you're describing. Just like we walk to school with these kids. Not doing all that. Carry an umbrella, get a coffee, just mosey, no stress, no actual traffic, just sidewalk pedestrians. But I like the Imperial March. I like that idea of like little Lane stomping off to take over the educational world.
Just listening to like Leia's Overture or whatever it was called. The music cue that would happen every time she came on screen. So dreamy.
What impact did it have on you wanting to get tenure? Is that where it started?
What? I don't think I knew what tenure was when I was that age. Like I didn't understand that like professor was a job. I did not have any cognizance of that until I went to college. There was nothing about being a high school teacher that looked appealing to me. Like there was no way that looked like a cool gig.
No. Like before they're 10 and then after they're 21. But there's like a decade in the middle. Like do not teach.
But when I was in college, I saw like I went on like a kind of club field trip, and I remember thinking, oh, this is what professors get to do.
Look at these people.
I don't know where I've never gone on a club field trip with a group of students, so that was a very inaccurate rendering of what my future life would involve. But I remember looking at this man and being like, he can just like book a hotel room anywhere in America. Wow. Like,
and
we're in New York City, I was a real bumpkin for a lot of years.
Listen, everybody starts as a bumpkin. Like most of us don't make it out. That's the problem. That's
So
excellent. That's excellent. Well, I
so
mean, you never know what you end up teaching as a teacher, or what part of this people pick up on. I want to talk about Poland, though. Speaking of going anywhere in the world, you were in Poland where?
no, I was in Prague. I was in
Oh, sorry,
Czechia.
Czechia,
Um,
the Czech Republic.
I was in the Czech Republic at a oral history training workshop for people for like folks in mostly Central and Eastern Europe who do like oral history related to the history of technology, mostly computing stuff. So I was the guest of honor in a certain sense. I was the import. They flew me in all the way from America to
Mm.
talk about oral history and to like read a little paper. And then I had to on the fly. I was not supposed to be the person who did this, but somebody, I don't know, there was some miscommunication or something. And I then had to conduct an interview with someone I had like barely just met while an audience watched. Like, this is an exercise you do in oral history training where you watch people conduct interviews. And I scandalized the Eastern Europeans because
But
I
it,
start my oral histories by asking about someone's like childhood background. Like, I
that's
don't just start with like when you got the job or tell us about your first memory of a computer. I'm like, tell me about
your
when and where you were
mother.
born, where you grew up, your educational and socioeconomic background. Like, I just start with like, and all of them heard like, ask me about your childhood, like, and it was very, I think the sort of communist privacy layer, like dealing with people who grew up in the legacy of communism
Mm.
and the kind of privacy and anxiety around the state and like what goes on in domestic space. Like, it was just like, you do not interview someone who's Polish by starting with a question like that. So I was talking to this like trans British woman. And so I was just like, tell me about your whole life. And she just like volleyed right back at me. And they were like, everyone in the room was just like, what's happening? Like, this is so uncomfortable for us.
Good job, Lane. Good job.
It was great. It was great, like encountering stuff like that, where you don't realize the things you take for granted because of your like geographic context, right? That's very useful information. I learned a lot about European digital privacy controls that, like we don't think about in the US at all. And yeah, the way that culture shapes the way that you would approach oral history in other places. It was very cool. I learned a lot. So
I wonder. So what's an oral history in a sense? I don't understand like how that's different from like just an interview.
yeah, so oral history has like a couple different ways that it's distinguished from other kinds of professional interviewing, whether like journalistic or ethnographic. One is that it is anticipated that the transcript or the recording would go into an archive, so it would be preserved for future use. Because of that, there is also considered in oral history to be a mandate for the interviewer to gather information beyond their specific project. So, because they're trying to create a kind of historical document with the conversation, you want to gather more information than just about the thing you're very, very specifically interested in. And then
Okay.
there's a whole kind of conversation around consent that's really
Right.
important. So, oral histories are treated as co-creations, like both the interviewer and the interviewee, who is usually called the narrator, are treated as like authors, and they can withdraw consent at any time. So it's not like journalism where like you get somebody on the record and they can't back out at a later date. Like, if at any point you want to shut this whole thing down, that's fine. And
Interesting.
so they
So
have
those are the
kind of
rules of the game.
yeah, they have complete autonomy over the conversational process. But yeah, so it's usually done because someone has a specific research project, but like for it to be an oral history, you're trying to capture a larger snapshot of the world kind of around this person. And there's lots of I mean, I use oral history really extensively in this hero work, but it was interesting to meet people who like work in a history department maybe, and like none of the historians they work with think that oral history is valid because it's not objective. And I'm like, what? Like, the idea that like oral like all historical documents fail some form of objectivity test, you know? But yeah, it's a really unique way. And usually you're not, I think a lot of my philosophy with oral history is that it's a weak way of getting pure factual data, but what it tells you is the way that people remember, and that is actually like of superior historical significance. So understanding like how kind of like the, you know, historical events embed themselves in the bodies of people, that is something you can kind of only get through oral history.
Interesting. Because it seems like a bunch of people just having tea and like talk about their feelings, right? It's sort of like a, what do you remember? Like, oh, I used to bike to school, whatever, like that. But so I could see how that from the outside would be a little bit like, oh, who cares, right? It seems a little too casual, but it somewhere sits probably somewhere between reporting the facts and the exactitude of things, and then like some therapy session in public. It's like, well, what do you remember? So it's like it captures sort of the colors,
Yeah.
and the sort of, I guess, the vibes.
You know, with
What?
like all my Sierra projects, I'm going to talk to people about their experiences, memories related to like working at this company, but I'm always trying to get a like bigger picture of like where did you like how I want to understand kind of everything about a person's kind of demographic background before, as we kind of figure out how did this specific opportunity become possible to you at a specific moment in time.
That's interesting because so it's really the aggregate of all these conversations that from which you can distill then like a broader narrative or a more
Yeah, in
clear
which I
picture.
like paint a picture of how this person exists in a moment in time. Yeah.
That's
So,
wild.
it's not for the weak. That's what I'll say.
Is that particularly big over there in Prague? Is it like the global HQ for oral histories or just?
No, I think it was just kind of where I think they were able to. So Yaroslav Svelch, I don't know if you know him.
Oh, yours.
Yeah, he's a game and computing history scholar. He wrote a book called Gaming the Iron Curtain about computer gaming in Soviet communist era Czechoslovakia. That came out 5 or 6 years ago, and that was a pretty big deal. It was kind of the first documentation of the life of computer hobbyism under that particular geopolitical context. And so there's a lot of people out there who are doing work like that. You're from Europe, you know about the demo scene. Everyone loves to talk about the demo scene. There's a
Okay.
lot of oral history related to the demo scene. So, you know.
I am familiar with Jaroslav's book. I haven't read it. I've glanced
So
through it.
he's at Charles University, which is in Prague,
Mhm.
and like he was kind of able to be like the host, and then it was put together by Maria Garda, who is like a Polish game and computing history scholar. So I think it was just like a good central location for many people in Europe getting together, and
Uh-huh.
it's a lovely city. I had never been. I managed to get one day to take a little walking tour. See, it's just like a super walkable city, and it's gorgeous. So
Yeah, yes. Well, you're that professor now that travels the world and goes on walking tours in between keynotes. You're a fancy professor, Lane. That sounds like fun. I do. It's not a practice or a tradition that I'm very familiar with, other than, of course, like I've heard of it. But I do find it interesting to hear people explain their own words what something was like, and so that I find that quite enlightening because I get so often confused with the idea that my perspective is everyone's perspective. It's like, oh shit, everybody feels this way. That no, nobody cares. It's not at all the same, you know, which is sort of like a classic thing, but it's very enlightening. But so you do have some rules around interviewing, I suppose, then,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you
There's a
learn
lot of
from.
like ethical behavior, transparency, trust building, consent practice that you engage in. That is probably about. It's like more along the lines of the rigor of something like anthropology, rather than. It's not to say that journalists don't engage in those kinds of practices as well, but I think it's a narrower scope of them. So
That's fantastic. I like that very much. When is your next trip? Do you have any lined up?
Internationally? No, I have no. I don't like to. So when people try to get me to come out to give talks, especially internationally, I actually usually turn it down. I just don't think it's like an amazing use of my time. The reason I said yes to this was because it was an opportunity to train people in a skill that I'm super passionate about. Like that to me, to build that network felt more important than like I show up and talk about my book. Like who cares? You can see it on YouTube, but instead to like engage in like a kind of teaching practice with professionals seemed really cool. um,
Can you give me the like two things that I should start doing or stop doing if I want to be a better oral historian?
well, you'd have to start doing oral history, so we'd have to begin there. It's not really a practice that makes sense for what you're trying to do.
No, no, but
That's
like
not.
if I was interested, like where would I start or how could I be better?
So there's a couple key books you can read that will take you through both. There's a book called Oral History Theory by Lynn Abrams that really is like a pretty good overview. And then there's a book called, I read a book, I was on my way to do my first oral histories on a plane, and I read a book called Doing Oral History. And that was how I learned. I have, I was never trained in this as a method. I kind of was self-taught. And I'm a bit like I don't necessarily like follow the rules all the time about how you're supposed to, you know, be in a noiseless place and like set up it's just like I always take the approach of like, you're my interview subject, I'm on your ride. You want to go to a bar? You want to go to a zoo? You want to go to a Sikh temple? Okay, like I'll follow you anywhere. We'll have some strange conversation in any old place. But
That
anyway,
suits you. That describes you so well. Like it's just like, but
yeah, it's like not what you're supposed to do, but I get really good results. So whatever. I do what I want.
I do what I want.
I do
I
what I
don't
want.
care. I don't care.
But
I've ta
this isn't an oral history about me, Yost. That's not what we're here to do today.
See what I was doing there? I was tricking you. I was tricking you. I'll follow you to any old podcast to have you talk about yourself. I'm glad to be back. This is not on the podcast, but we're meeting up for drinks later, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah,
To
we're
kick
having
off,
our first real IRL production meeting, to which Keaton will also be participant.
it's
So
go- it's gonna be. So if you hear a bunch of noise in Brooklyn,
yeah,
it's
yeah. If
us.
you see us and you're like, "Oh my God, can I get their autograph?" Roll it up. We love it.
Yeah, we'll do a few, but you know.
All right, so I thought since it's back to school season and people love the education content, it's funny. We had a discussion midsummer that was like, we're back at this in the fall. What are our concerns about our syllabi? What are the questions we have? What changes are we thinking about? Now, you and I are both teaching this very week. And the question is like, what made the cut? What changes got made? What,
Mhm.
readings, topics, approaches got shifted around? What, like, out of that, those questions and anxieties, what actually materialized? So I know, for me, where the changes are. I'm curious to hear where yours happened.
Okay. I like that conversation. So just to kind of recap, right? So like as we were talking about the different syllabi between the two of us and how they connect and overlap or not. I got a lot out of that, both in form and function, where I say like content and logistics. The logistics is sort of obvious. So, well,
That's
so so the idea that you gave me over the summer was to do, for one, was to do the exit tickets. I like that idea very much. I do think that a little bit more discipline on being like on attendance and being present is important. I just haven't seen it. I would love to see it in action one time. Maybe you can tell me more about it or whatever. But it's like, do you hand out a bunch of cards at the start of class and at the end
No, they bring their own cards.
they bring their own
Or
cards?
or they just like tear a piece of paper out of their notebook and they write their name on it. They're supposed to bring their own index cards. Most of them don't. I'm not going to police it because like I don't want to live that life. So they write their question down on whatever, like the tiniest scrap of paper you could possibly imagine half the time.
Then you
And
just end
and
up with a desk full of this
yeah,
like
you just
scrap paper.
my TA, who is also Keaton, will bring an
Oh,
envelope. I've got the
You have a
double dip.
Keaton.
I have a Keaton, yeah, this semester.
You're just
So,
better at this than I see why
um,
you are where you are. Very smart.
but my recommendation is just like you bring an envelope and you binder clip them and you shove them in a folder, and then I have a spreadsheet that with all the students' names on it and
Hmm.
every date for which there should be an exit ticket, and it's a 1 or a 0. They either did it or they didn't. But yeah, it is a little bit, it'll take 15 minutes to like sort through them, and then I ask Keaton to like, filter for me the ones that either ask direct questions about stuff that about lecture that a student doesn't understand that maybe I should go back over in the next lecture, or
Hmm.
just anything that seems like a particularly good question, fun observations. It's like temperature control, basically. Sometimes I'll use them, sometimes I won't, but it's mostly just an easy way that I can like proxy for attendance and that I know whether or not a student was present.
Right, and like the ones that fail, they are just like never around, and you have zero tickets.
Sometimes that's the case, yeah, you know. Or they fail for other reasons. It's a very small percentage. It's only 5% of the grade.
Hmm.
It's a very small percentage because I just don't believe in being grade inflationary around things like attendance or participation. So I try to make all the assessment pretty like quantifiable, you know.
Gotcha. I like that model. So I'm thinking about incorporating that because I feel so often it's like when discipline and accountability is sort of like the adult in the room or the whatever manager in the room. Imposing it on them comes with imposing it on yourself, and it holds you to a higher standard, right? It's like if I don't hold you accountable, the implied contract is that you also let me kind of goof off and do whatever. And so by setting a standard, it reflects back on you. You're like, oh, now I gotta be the adult.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
If
that's
you
so
say you're going
that's
to do
kind of
something with them, you have to do it or else you lose all credibility.
yes.
Yeah.
So that's the one consideration. And the other one was labor. I know I don't want to take away one of your favorite phrases that there is a class at the business school about games that doesn't even talk about labor. It's actually factually partially incorrect, but I do see that there is a broader need for a conversation about this now that there's been like several years of record layoffs for one, and that there is unionization as a strategic consideration emerging all around us in the industry. So I do think that that was a very helpful sort of thing to bring back into the syllabus. I haven't quite decided if I want to do it in a single module where I'm going to talk about it for 20 minutes or if I sort of sprinkle it around. I think it's going to be part of the beginning where I sort of like, oh, things are changing and this is one of the symptoms of that change. And
Mm.
then here's the future, and this is probably going to be part of the future. Like, what does that look like when it professionalizes or unionizes more like, say, Hollywood? What does that do for game design? How do you invest in that? Blah, blah, blah. So that's the content side I really liked. Those are two of my changes.
I love that. I love that this conversation shifted the way you're thinking about content. I feel like that is the essence of collaboration, and
Mm.
and Stern should give us money for how successful that was, Steinhardt certainly won't. So,
Yeah, how much money, Lane? How much?
I mean, we could, if we had a little bit of a funding line, we could really get up to trouble. I feel like
What
that
kind of
needs to be
trouble are?
one.
What is like,
We could,
bar
we could,
trouble?
like pulling off events and writing white papers and whatnot. That like
Oh,
there's a lot of juice here that the university isn't getting much utility out of.
listen. As an
So,
education influencer, I am all for building out an entire merch line of cool stuff. No, but we should. Like, I do think that there is an increased collaboration. This is always the vision and the dream I think that we both had, which is bringing all these different faculties into the same room. My own experience, I hate it so much when you have this sort of animosity or competition or just derision between different faculties. Where it's like, oh, it's the business school people, blah 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 blah, whatever. Like, obviously,
well, they
everybody,
often do suck, but
you know, what sucks about non-business school students is that they don't donate to their faculty. So,
because we're
so,
not making any money.
oh yeah, so you're right both times. You're always right. You're both the repressed and the repressor. It's great.
Uh,
But so that kind of thinking is only partially helpful, of course, right? And so bringing
yeah,
together NYU game students, game center students into my classroom with like Sternies, like that creates conversation where you see them disagree or they totally agree and they didn't realize they were friends all along. And so that's really the I don't know, the vibe I was looking for in my own classroom. But by connecting it to your set of thoughts and questions, like I think it's becoming bigger. And it's inviting. So I don't know. Like I'll let you talk about how you're changing your syllabus, but I think that there's like an end game here too. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so changes to my syllabus. I think there are basically like 3 lectures that are going to get some reworking.
Mhm.
I talked a lot last time about my frustration about wanting a Dimitri Williams article on the structure and competition of the US game industry designed for the 21st century. That article does not exist. I cannot find it. So what I finally did was I just scoped down
Mhm.
the section I want the students to read. And I was like, there's actually 3 pages of this that is relevant that I'm going to teach. And so I'm leaving the article on there, but with a big note that like you're really only supposed to read like 3. I mean, they won't know that unless they bother to read my note, but I really only need them to read the 3 pages that are about the vertical stages of the game industry, and the rest of it they can kind of leave behind. So that's how I'm adapting that part, because I still think the teaching the vertical stages is still relevant, right? It's how any kind of physical goods industry works, and there's still plenty of those no matter what. But in terms of ones where I really revised the content, so my day on game labor, I got rid of a Mia Consalvo essay about gender and crunch in the game industry because it was just like really old. It was like almost, it had to have been like almost 20 years old at this point, and it just didn't. It was called Crunched by Passion, and it was about how the language of passion is used as a rationale to basically engage in exploitative business practices.
Mhm.
I don't actually lean on the essay that hard. I teach another article by Nick Dyer-Whiteford and Greg DePuter called EA Spouse and the Crisis of Video Game Labor that actually kind of covers that material really similarly. So, this was overdue. I got rid of the Consalvo, and I've added this article I'm really excited about. And I'm going to give a big shout out to Jose Zagal, who forwarded me this piece and told me about it. But it's called Game Design for a Fiverr, Precarity, Regionality, and Platform Mediation in the Gig Economy. And so I thought that would be a cool place to go after we talk about like crunch and exploitation and all those kind of basics. We can also talk about what does this kind of work look like? What does like the knowledge economy look like when gigafied? And so the whole way that people use Fiverr as this platform Fiverr, which is basically just it's almost like it's like hiring like the cheapest possible labor to get stuff done, to get for all sorts of tasks, but particularly it's been used in game design to get people to do all kinds of like different developmental stages on the cheap. So yeah, I'm excited to add that in. So we're going to talk about like gig work and larger themes of economic precarity that are very much a part of the way that I frame the game labor conversation, but this is really new content for the first time. So I've shifted around the mobile gaming one to kind of talk more explicitly about Tencent. So I've added an article called by Neil Ko and Shun Young, Mobile Gaming Production Networks, Platform Business Groups, and the Market Power of China's Tencent. So it's specifically talking about how Tencent functions in the kind of mobile ecology of China. So I removed for that reason our good buddy, the other Dutchman that we've had on here,
David.
David Nieberg. Yeah, he had a piece I had used for a really long time about the development of the mobile game industry that just, it was too long in the tooth. It
Mhm.
kind of like situated itself at the kind of origins of the mobile game movement, or the kind of the second phase. And at that point, it's a decade old, and I wind up having to do a lot of historical background to make the argument make sense to them. So I was like, I'll carve all that out of this deck, and giving more attention to China is never a bad idea in this class. So yeah, and then I kept the trajectories and market hype day focused on the metaverse and platformatization through Roblox. So I decided to just stick with the content I had 2 years ago. I'm not sure there's actively something else that's changing, like a trend in that's changing game consumption, unless I wanted to do something like sports gambling, which I'm we'll talk about a little later when we discuss the survey. But
Sports gambling. Yeah, it's I like that. So I mean, you pick up a few different dimensions here. One of them is like it's constantly changing, but you can't embrace new things too quickly because like next semester that's nonsense, or they just don't care. Like, by show of hands and like nobody
yeah,
responds, you're like, okay, the next 30 minutes are gonna suck for everyone. You know, by show of hands, who's in the metaverse? And no one even knows what that is.
crickets. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's gonna be very boring. So you wanna be careful with that. And it's a function of the games industry or whatever, tending to be this echo chamber of sorts. Then the other thing you're saying is great. It's like on the other end of that, it's like you end up with a lot of outdated literature,
Yeah.
or it's a little too academic, right? It's like, well, play a century ago was blah blah blah, and in the tenement buildings of the East Village, you could only play scraps, and so whatever. So, I was like, there's like all these like very localized, specific examples. You know, there's of how like I mean, it's really necessary to talk about chess being outlawed by the church a few centuries ago. Is that really a thing? Or is it cooler to talk about chess as one of the first killer apps for the telegraph 150 years ago, right? So it's all kind of interesting, but at some point, it's like, this is like, I'm not getting anything from this.
Mm.
It's sort of more of the same. So that's a hard thing to always kind of gauge. Like your searchlight has to be somewhat focused.
You develop certain. I find I develop certain attachments or sympathies for specific articles, even though like I haven't read them since I because it's not a lecture, it's not a discussion based course. Like I haven't read these articles in like years. But like I go through I go through their like points every year, and it's like, here we are to talk about this thing, and pulling it out does feel like saying goodbye to a friend. Like I've got a perfect midterm or final question about David Nieberg's theory of from the many to the few in terms of mobile game production, and it's like, all right, I'm gonna have to write something new. So sad.
Yeah. But so here's the thing. So that's sort of like the meta question that I have, right? It's like, so I like this idea of sort of starting over. So the beginning of the semester, like Labor Day for me, is the beginning of my year, effectively, like my production year, right? It's the run up to the holiday season in December, then you have like spring and then summer again. So it's not January 1st, it's really like September 1st that my year starts. And it's in so many ways always incredible to have like an empty slate, like to start from nothing. And with a syllabus in place, it's so tempting to just kind of keep recycling the same components. But what's stopping me from doing that every year is, of course, the fact that it's just safer and comfy and so on. Things don't necessarily need all that. Like you can't rewrite the same lecture over and over again. Like things are the way they are, right? I mean, Nintendo did what it did in the 80s. That doesn't change from one lecture to the next. And it's not as if the audience has some collective knowledge of it, like they've all heard this already. So you're just recycling at least part of it. But the idea of having to challenge yourself with like new content, that is incredible. Like it's terrifying. I get the comfort of it, of keeping it the same at the same time. Changing it is key because otherwise, like it becomes like for me, like there was a moment. This was a couple of years ago. I realized I'd been doing the same lectures and modules over and over. I was like, I don't like this anymore. It's getting boring now, and so to reinvigorate, to kind of keep it interesting for yourself, like you must do that, which probably sounds like obvious in some ways, but the anxiety around dispatching and extending, breaking up with your friends in that context, it's terrifying.
I mean, some lectures are more iterative than others. There's a lot of this class that's historical background. Certainly the first three lectures, like not
Mhm.
like I mean, I can take different approaches, and I've done that a lot in the console gaming one, where I've turned that into a more global facing lecture. That was a really important shift. But I love having a lecture that's like, I mean, I think of it's like writing a book. It's like this lecture is like sanded and sharp, and all of its corners are perfectly folded, and it doesn't need an inch of improvement. And that's what I desire out of every lecture that I write, to achieve a kind of platonic form, And then some of them just like can't do that because like the content shifts too
Hmm.
much over time, or that you're gonna have to kind of continue to rethink it. But I always book in time that one or two of the lectures in this class in particular usually needs a bit of an overhaul every
Hmm.
semester. That something has just kind of outlived its usefulness, and we have to move on from it. But otherwise, all my assessments are the same. I think that stuff all works. I like how it functions. My presentations, encyclopedia articles, midterm and final now, it's a popular mode of assessment with the rise of AI. So, you're going to come in
Maybe
and,
maybe you have to get rid of that.
yeah, that's right. You're going to come in and get out a pen and take a test. Like that's what's going to happen. So,
Let
uh,
me ask you a question about that. Do you think it's reasonable to ask students to come in, sit in a room for an hour, and write down, say, 400 words on a strategic problem?
to in like what's the
Well, so instead
prompt?
of instead of whatever, pick one of the following four prompts and put them on the big screen or
Yes.
whatever,
Yes, I think that's a perfectly reasonable
as
assessment.
opposed to write a paper that you spent a week struggling over, and it's going to be mostly AI enabled, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think so Clay Shirky just wrote this piece for the Atlantic about this, and I have feelings about this because Clay Shirky was, he's the ed tech head at NYU, and he is one of the people who is kind of, signed off slash enabled the encroaching of AI tools into NYU. All the students have access to Gemini now, right? So it's kind of like being like, here's how to defeat the dragon, says the man who opened the door for the dragons. But his position is like we actually have to revert to apologies if Glacier Key is listening to this. We actually have to revert to an almost kind of medieval orientation that focuses on liveness and kind of recall and also ability to take ideas and apply them in real time. So like presentations, tests, how like having to show your work, right, has a new value. So I definitely think putting a couple prompts on a board, on an overhead and saying pick one and you need to write this many pages or give them blue books or whatever. You need to answer this question, in the span of an hour is an absolutely appropriate way of assessing them, and it takes out the thing they can't hide, you know and it's not to say that we have to hunt them down or something, but it pushes them in a way that the technology does not.
I like that idea very much. It's consistent with a lot of observations, where I mean, the best way to illustrate it is I gave my 12-year-old a smartphone and he didn't care at all about having a phone, which I thought was going to be this big technological like liberation for him. So I feel like there's this sort of natural analog renaissance of sorts in response to all of this like tech stuff. And so when it comes to the classroom, I think it's a little too late to do that for this semester, but I can see maybe next semester the idea of giving students a 2 week run up, like releasing the prompts 2 weeks before the final, and say, you're going to pick one of these, you're going to read up, you're just going to bone up on it, take the lectures, whatever, read a couple articles. And then in the classroom, you bring a pen and you're going to sit there for an hour or two and you're going to give me your best go at why Nintendo needs to buy EA or whatever your strategic thing is. And like, and there's no charts and there's no nonsense with footnotes. It's just none of the ceremony and sort of like the admin. Just give me the raw feed. The challenge is, of course, like how am I going to be able to read all that? It's like all this handwritten muck. But I
Yeah,
guess they can bring
it's
computers. I don't
I'm
know.
I mean, well, you don't really want them with access to a computer.
No,
Listen, teachers dealt with messy handwriting for sure. I mean, I guess kids used to be better trained in quality of handwriting, but
yeah, it's not their fault.
you know, I think the one thing I will caution you about, and I say this with my director of undergraduate studies hat on, is that if you give them the exact prompt, there are students who will write it ahead of time and memorize it, or they will like which opens the door for being able to use something like ChatGPT to write it ahead of time and memorize it. So, like, we've had issues where, like, students who studied together will come into a test and give the exact same answers at length. And then you're in a real puzzle, right? Because you're like, well, you didn't plagiarize, but these aren't original thoughts. And so you just want to be like careful about how how much the information you give them ahead of time is a one-to-one match for what they're asked to do when they come into
Okay,
class.
that's a good one.
You
So
know, and so
then,
you want to finesse. It's more like I want, like, this is the thing you're going to be asked to do. These are some of the terms you're going to be asked to think about. You're going to want to pick some companies and do some preceding research, but then they don't quite know how it's going to apply until they're
hmm,
in the room.
that's I like that. So like you reveal the three. So you could say these are the four prompts, but you reveal the companies you want them to write about only in the moment of the exam. And then you could, I know from doing a tally every semester, like Nintendo is very popular, Riot Games very popular. So I could say you do easy, average, and hard or something. And say like the easy one's Nintendo, write about Nintendo. Anybody can write a case study about Nintendo. They know enough. But let's do one on Valve or do one about this like obscure indie studio,
Well, I
and like
mean,
give them extra points.
I might actually flip this a bit because, like, to answer questions like that effectively, they would need a lot of data on their hands. And so it would almost be kind of intriguing for the prompt to be the thing they don't know, but you give them the data in the room, right? Imagine giving them a sheet with like all the metrics for like Valve and EA, and you're like, use these to construct or
Like
a,
a like a
a
like a document
yeah,
of
a pitch response to like this prompt up here, and here you've got all the materials, right? That is vetted and correct, but you have to think about you have to look at these, you have to know how to read these documents first of all, and how to make meaning out of this kind of data in order for it to be usable, right? Because what you don't like, do you really want them to spending their time memorizing the user base of
no, 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 no.
Valve?
No, so,
Right?
so,
So
so
it's like design the assessment in a way that gets them to do the work you actually want them to do.
I like that. So there's a lot here. But so the it reminds me to some degree is like this idea of like the Amazon six pager. You familiar with
Hmm.
this?
No.
Right? Where so to save like corporate meetings are an enormous waste of time most of the time. And Amazon solved a lot of that by saying you call a meeting, okay, great. That means that beforehand you're going to write 6 pages explaining what the meeting is about, what we're deciding, blah, blah, blah. And you provide all the information. And then everybody that's attending the meeting is going to read that before they get the first 20 minutes of the meeting. They sit there and just read it so that upon the 20th minute, everybody's read everything. And now we can talk about the thing as opposed to me explaining it and you kind of falling asleep halfway so that actual decisions can get made across a group of
Oh
people.
yeah.
And the
Yeah.
size of that group of people is something along the lines of however many people you can feed with 2 pizzas or something. There's some kind of clever metaphor for that. So you have the 6 pager and there's 2 boxes of pizza in your head. You're like, okay, that's the group of people, that's the method. But it allows you to take decisions in the moment, in real time. And so what so often tends to be missed is like it all like work sort of disappears to the fringes. Like I think one of the fundamental problems with labor, whether that's students or workers, is that they're sort of expected to do all this stuff on their own time in the dark at night outside of office hours. And you're like, what happens when they do that? Are they sitting at home drinking coffee? Like, and I get that everybody has their process, but it's like, that's like there's discipline to things. And like you can do a lot if you know how to do it in the moment itself. And so this would be sort of like a catering to that idea of like, let's bring students in the room, give them 90 minutes, give them like data sheets. Everybody gets a printout of 20 pages with like a bunch of numbers. And then you have a few prompts that you can choose from and write a strategic response to this company challenge or whatever. And off you go.
I like that idea. That's a savvy implementation, right? And it gets you out of it, kind of reinvents something you've already been doing, but puts them in a context in which like the experience of being in that moment is also part of what they're learning how to handle, you
What?
know?
What? Give me. So I have my versions of this, but so give me an example where you would apply that kind of practice or skill into an everyday scenario as an adult, right?
I
Because
mean,
so much of
that
that can
that
be like sort of
that
abstract.
that is I mean, the sitting in a meeting and having to analyze, look at numbers on the fly, and have
Hmm.
responses to them is an everyday skill, right? It's like a live consulting conversation, or it's a, imagine a scenario where you're presented with this information. What do you want to do with it? And let's imagine you can't just like disappear and go ask ChatGPT for 25 minutes what you should think about it. Like, what do you think about it? Do you know how to begin to look at a problem and break it down into its parts? That's always the pedagogic scaffold.
Right. So here's where my mind goes, and this is the last piece, and then we can move on. But it's the, you know, so I've been spending the last month working on the manuscript, and I find like my mind wanders. Like there's all this like dry theory and numbers, like oh, markets fluctuate, they go up and down, and you can call that a thing. But better to have also the occasional vignettes of like, here's how company X solved problem Y. So I've been working on these case studies, and then you have different versions. You have this sort of Harvard one, which is more meant for like conversation in front of a classroom, and there's no the actual thing doesn't really matter. You're not supposed to really answer the question. You're supposed to just discuss the question, right? And then there's other versions of this, but I like very much sort of like a sort of an illustrated scenario where a bunch of people tried to fix the thing or had to like confront a certain set of equally valuable answers or challenges. In that sense, it's like I'd like the idea very much is where you say, okay, there's three stacks, and a Valve one, there's a Riot one, and a Nintendo one. Each of them have a 4 to 6 page case study in the front, and then you answer a question in the back, and that's what you hand in. So now you get the information, spend 20 minutes reading it, everything is there, and after 2 hours, that's it. Like that's your answer, just like you would in the real world, right? Just like you would at a higher education level, as you would in a corporate meeting. Like, how do we solve this goddamn problem? It's
I
as
think
simple.
that's a great premise for an assessment.
Okay, let me go write those case studies. No big deal.
ChatGPT can write them for you.
Ah, genius. No,
Do you want to
I'm gonna do this.
productive conversation? Do you want to crack open this survey real quick before we
Yes.
So as a reminder, dear audience, this was a thing I started doing a couple of years ago where I would kind of I always have my students fill out it used to be a physical sheet, and then it was a Google form of just like get to know you information. And for the video game class, I started adding questions about their play practices until that section has kind of turned into something long enough that I've made it its own separate form. And now what Yost and I do is we both give it to our classes so that we can look at our results as an aggregate. It changes the data pool from 50 to, you teach a class of 50, right?
Yeah, 50, 60, something like
Yeah.
that.
So, together we're looking at about a section of 100, which just, it makes the results richer. And I sent Yost the survey. I added some questions, whatever. I sent it to him a couple weeks ago. And last night, it was the best email exchange ever. I get an email from him that's just like, this looks great. I have no comments. And then I write back, it's hard being this good. And then he writes back, well, then actually, no, I have a lot. I want to change a bunch of things. And, and he's like, I'm in here, like adding questions, shifting stuff. Like something motivated him to go in and start tagging on to what I had done. And I haven't even looked at the changes, so we're going to kind of review them live, but we're going to kind of walk you through the questions we ask and why. And then we're going to have the results next week, basically.
Mhm. I wanted I want to comment. It's like clearly that was the wrong. It's like I get so motivated when people go like, oh, I don't want to be. I hate those emails. Like, oh, this is amazing. And you're like, God damn it, Lane. Fine. And but there's like it's a bit of like a sunk cost. It's like either I can kind of like brush over it in 5 minutes and like add a little value, like make some typo changes, whatever, or I'm gonna really sit down now and take some actual IQ points and throw it at it. Which you can be the judge of that if that actually worked. But it's like there's no middle ground. There's no like let me just kind of casually create lots of value and it was like 8:30 at night. I just put the little kid in bed. The big kid was like dragging me, like he wanted to watch TV together. It's like, oh, it's like, no, fuck it. Let's just do this right. So I added some changes.
Oh, you made sections. Interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
So the first thing we do is ask them what country do they identify as being from, right? So we get a question of kind of demography, but we don't ask any questions about gender or like any other orientation. We're mostly just interested in having a little more context for how.
It's that one is problematic for two reasons. One of them is it's very long on the
Well,
back
no,
end. So just practically you constantly have to scroll this massive list.
yeah, but that only you and I have to do that, so it's
Yeah,
really
no, no.
not a problem.
It's just a severe problem. Secondly, just based on the UN Statistical Commission's country list, like and then it has like all these like sort of zip code identifiers behind every country's name.
Yeah,
Like
this is how you do this properly, Yost. So the country list is pulled from the UN Statistical Commission of Countries, right? And so that is a standard that you can use
all right,
for having a list of countries when you're doing statistics.
I know that part, but then then why don't we have the PlayStation 5 Pro or the different like hardware devices delineated equally specific?
What are you talking about?
So this is, it's just to say like there's a lot of extra flair that goes into the country list, but the hardware list is just like, oh,
Well,
here,
because there are
Xbox.
many countries in the world, I don't understand the question.
I feel
Like
like there's precision there, but there is lack of precision elsewhere.
I think that asking, yeah, countries are precise things.
Mm.
And I think that having a general sense of, I don't need to know the version control on which version of a console a student is using. Like, I don't know that I would make a distinction between, well, I guess, yeah, the X, is it a Series S or a Series X? Like, whatever, it's your most recent Xbox.
It's whatever. It's the
Like, who
one
cares?
country you're thinking from.
You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that is a Wii U. What a offensive option. But anyway, so
Are you one of the 14?
so section 2 is device ownership and access. So the first question is, what current or recent gen gaming devices do you own? Yost went hog wild here, adding in a bunch. I was like, PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo. Like, I was just like, give it to me in the big three. And he went in and really diversified that list. If you play games on PC, what digital storefronts do you use? That's a Steam versus Epic versus itch for the most part.
Yeah, I mean
Designation.
it's not I mean there's like GOG and a bunch of other ones that should be in there, but
Nobody's using fucking GOG. Like in this 100-person pool, it's
historically like it's
it's
not my
really what we're
classroom.
really trying to look at is monopoly power within this. That's how it relates to the kinds of questions I ask, right? It's like, how many of you use a non-Steam storefront? And the answer is almost none of them, right? And so that demonstrates something pedagogically for me when I get to that section of the curriculum. Do you own a VR headset? Yes or no? I don't care what kind. I have no interest in knowing what kind.
It's the owning is problematic because it's like, it's a
I
lot of
thought
times
you
it's
you
one
made
per
this how you wanted it. You want to revise it right now?
I do. I do.
So what do you want? Do you have act? Do you regularly use? Is that what you or
Yeah. Do you
do
play
you?
regularly, like say once a week, using a VR headset? There you go.
Okay.
I
Do
mean,
you
and there's
play?
plenty of different
Okay.
ones.
Okay. That's valid. Do you play or own assets in any blockchain or NFT games?
Yeah, I was surprised to find that in there.
Well, that was a hangover from when I had a whole section on Hype Day about blockchain NFT. But
There's always like one or two. It's
there's
really
always
interesting.
a very small number, and then there's like always one who does but didn't realize it.
Exactly.
All right, section 3, gaming habits. How many mobile games do you have downloaded on your phone? I want to write open your phone.
Yeah, count.
Count, kids.
Count for credit, children.
And these designations are kind of we have none, 1 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 9, or 10 or more. And I just sort of made those up. I don't know, I know, yeah.
Very,
Um,
very scientific.
what game do you think you play on the most? What game platform? Console, PC, or mobile? What game are you currently most excited about playing or
I
spending the most
like that
time
one. I
on?
like that one.
I
Because
like to know what they're into,
yeah, but
I just want.
that gives you conversation. Like, oh, six you mentioned.
And you're like, oh, what am I missing out on? And it just turns out it's fucking Counter Strike. Like no surprises here. What non-game media? Oh, this is a Yoast Transmedia question. Okay.
Let's
What
go.
non? And you just, for no good reason, you bolded your question headline. I'm gonna.
Yeah, do that.
What?
Yeah. All the best questions are bolded.
What non-game media do you spend the most time with? So, music, film, TV, sports, social media, books, podcast or radio, and so they can pick only one, right?
No, this
Yeah.
is this
Yeah.
is boxes.
Boxes. Okay. Podcast. Yeah. A little. I mean, you know that people's self-reporting is notoriously inaccurate. Like people do not know
That's
what they spend their time
that's
on.
that's why I'm in the business I am, because that's
My
exactly
favorite
right.
game when I was 12 years old was. Whoa.
I like that one.
What's the last game you played that surprised you, good or bad?
That was
Okay.
yours. I like that one too. Like it has like sort of
I
like
did. I wrote
like a
that.
f- yeah. That's I think
Amazing.
so. But it has like
I
it's
don't
sort of
I
these
don't think I
vibe.
wrote that, but
It's one of these vibe questions,
yeah.
like because my students will a lot of times say like, "Well, I'm not really a gamer, but I play the shit out of Wordle." Like, okay, that counts.
Yeah.
Like
Section 4, watching and social. So, what platforms do you watch game live streams on? And so this is like a Twitch or YouTube, but also we have Kick, Huya, Facebook, Douyu, Bilibili, Africa. We have strong East Asian contingents in our classrooms. So we want to make sure we give a diversity of options there. Do you watch non-game content on streaming platforms like just chatting? So I added that. I was really interested in how many of them are using the platform for non-game related activities. I've watched a live concert in a game. Did you add that, Yost?
yep.
Yeah. You're obsessed.
Just what like with what?
You love talking about live concerts. Like that is a thing that is
Is that a hobby
a
horse? Oh
it's a
no.
topic you enjoy. Yeah.
Oh
Do you use Discord? I think that was probably my question.
yeah,
I like
that
that you
feels like
put these into categories. I think that's useful. Yeah.
it's a well, when you look at the front of it, then it does only a few questions at a time. So you
Yeah.
don't get this wall of questions. You just get three of them, and then the next section. It's do you use Discord? Feels like it could use a follow up, but I didn't have any suggestions there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could ask a lot of questions about Discord. I think to begin with, I just want to know, is it as widespread amongst the youth as I suspect it is, right? Is it as
Mhm.
endemic as a social media platform as I have a sense that it is? And then section 5, participation and creation. So the question is, I've designed or created content on the following platforms that monetizes user-generated content. Check all that apply. Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft.
I
We
added
should have an
Minecraft.
other there, right? Right?
Yeah, yeah, let's do that.
Are you doing that? Okay, yeah. Because somebody's gonna show up and be like, yeah, The Sims, like
Inzoy.
yeah, some student will have a really niche fucking answer. Any other games related activities you'd like to share? Are you an active streamer? Do you play esports? What do you hope to get out of this? Oh, I shouldn't. Did you add the what do you hope to get out of this class?
That was yours.
Oh, okay. I should put that in. I'm going to delete that. That should be in my, like, who are you? Get to know you quiz. It should not be in this because we don't know who they are, right?
Yeah, and it's sort of like irrelevant. But
I hope to work in the game industry one day. Okay. Adjacent behaviors. Oh, Luke. Oh, Yost went ham.
let's go. Let's get in the
I play
bus.
board games regularly. I play collectible card games, and these are more than once a month. Do you have a sports betting app on your phone? Do you actively place bets on a sports betting app? Also, I was hanging out with Mittu Kandakar, the game designer at NYU Game Center last night.
Mhm.
We were watching the Liberty game. And she said we should ask them how often they use ChatGPT.
Okay. Can you phrase it as a question? Like,
I mean, the question would be how often do you... It's an adjacent behavior. You know, it's not game related, it's technology related, but if you wanted to get a little insight, we would just ask how often do you use a generative AI tool like ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, whatever. And it would be like never, you know, multiple times a day, once every day or two, you know, once or twice a week, something like that.
okay, let's add it in. There's a part of my life where the question how AI is influencing or impacting the games industry, sort of the supply side, keeps coming up. And the short answer, the easy answer is, of course, on the short term, it's more efficient. But like, what emergent forms of gameplay can we identify that are uniquely AI enabled? I'd love to I'd love to see that happen more. Or
What
never
are
like
what are the other the main ones are ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, Claude. That's yeah.
Perplexity. Is that one?
Let's say the first answer is multiple times a day.
Mm-hmm.
The next one would be once every day or two,
Mm-hmm.
several times a week. No,
Yeah,
that would
just
be the
weekly. Yes.
weekly, rarely, and never.
Yeah, I like that.
Right? Does that is so rarely is like once a month or less times a month? How do we like that?
I like it. I like it. The so, what are you hoping to get out of this survey?
I want to know where the concentrations are. That's mostly what I'm looking for, right? So what is dominant among them, especially since we have such a geographically diverse group of students? How much does a center kind of prevail over that? What parts of games are global culture and what parts of games are local culture, right? And so that's why I added, because I've never asked a country designation question before, and so I'm super interested. And I didn't want to do regions. I think I started doing regionality, and then I was like, oh, this is a mess. Like, it's fucking offensive to say MENA, you know, and then how do you talk about the rest of Africa versus like what the fuck is Oceania? You know, I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna do a drop down, pick your fucking country, and you can write in Palestine. I don't like, fine by me. So
It's just what the fuck is Oceania? It almost feels like Atlantis.
yeah, it's
Like
like this is mythical, right? This isn't real. Like, I
he
mean, I know
comes from
Australia is a big
Oceania.
place. I had originally started to do regionalism, and then that just kind of falls apart real quickly. And so I was like, I will let them designate, and then from there we can like do create some pivot tables. Why not? You know?
Do you feel like students have to answer these kinds of questions too often, or not enough?
No, I don't think anyone ever does. I think this is fairly uncommon.
To
How
ask
often do they get asked about whether or not they use Discord? No, I don't think
no,
anyone.
no, no, not our questions. Like this sort of like a very precise country delineation and
I don't. You really fixate. I think that when you're filling out all sorts of things, you have to answer what country you are from.
there's a the pretext here is like you realize I'm an immigrant in this place, and so I've been filling out forms almost on a daily basis for the last 20 years. So I'm quite comfortable with all that. It's more like but that's my experience as an immigrant. So as a student, it's like answer these questions at some point. It's just like, do you get kind of dull? You're like, oh my God, here they come again with another form. See, I don't have any choice, or I didn't feel like I had a choice, and you try to do
I
a good
think
job.
the benefit is that it is the only demographic question we're asking. We're not asking gender. We're not asking sexuality. We're not asking like, do you identify as a 2S LGBTQ plus ally? You know, like it's just like, where are you from? Because where they are the and so well here I might ask, do you think we should say where is your citizenship? Or should we say what I have written now is what country do you most identify as being from?
I will raise you and say I don't think we need to know it at all. Who cares? You're an NYU student. That's the common
What
denominator.
are
Like
you
you're
talking? Like I like the distinctions between what our Chinese students do versus our Taiwanese versus our Japanese versus our American
Belgians,
versus
Belgian
our
students.
Belgians, right? Our LATAM, like the Brazilian versus Mexico, like those will they will have distinctions. Otherwise, we're reverse inferring that a student who watches Doyu is Chinese, right? Like, why don't we just or maybe you're from Taiwan or Hong Kong or,
Mhm.
I think it's like it is the single most impactful demographic indicator of gameplay preferences
Like
over
country or like citizenship.
country. Yeah, I would argue more than gender, more than age would be the other one, but they're all roughly the same age. So
Yeah, there's no
we have a
differentiation.
stable age bracket. I think where they are from, I don't know. Let me try this. Let's see if it produces interesting. Is it gonna
No,
bear out?
we're doing it. We're doing. I
We're
just like
doing.
it's like we're not changing that part. It's
I'm
more
making
the
a valiant defense of this as a
no.
demographic data point.
You're very convincing. It's more along the lines of so often when I do commercial research and surveys, it's like the reason people want to know, a company wants to know what the demographic is because they want to frame that their product is loved equally by all the genders or whatever, or that they cater to, that they're
Yes.
just sort of like an equal opportunity offender in all these things. And I think but so that it's already decided beforehand how they want to shape the marketing pitch that comes out of this. And I know that you know that. And so as a result, survey takers have come into this habit of like, here's the 6 questions we always do. It's like your name and it's your gender and your country and your state. What state are you from? And it's like as if Ohio and North Dakota, like as a Dutchman, it's just mind-boggling that you would first ask all that stuff. Like the real meat is in this other stuff, but it helps organize the bucket of humans, right, into like categories. And so I just wonder if you could do the same or perhaps more if you knew less. And I do
Well,
think that
we're only gonna
gender
have one demographic data point, which is where you're
is
from. So I'm glad, and I am proud to not ask questions about their gender or sexuality. That's not our fucking business, and I don't think it actually shapes their gameplay preferences that much. So,
I'm gonna I'm gonna wonder if that's entirely true. I mean, I don't think it's my
I
business.
mean,
I find
probably
it's
probably gender, but like I don't want to like give into. I think that we have a unique opportunity at a university like this to really get a portrait of what like a global student player base does and how they play in a way that you can't do at most universities, you know?
well, yes. And while you're
And
correct, I also want to point out that a lot of these students are paying 50 grand a year somehow, and so they're part of a particular subset of the global population that made it
sure,
here. So it's
yes.
it's it's not necessarily representative in all aspects. But so again, like income, gender, all these things, at some point you just get to a smaller piece, which is sort of like the specter of like college level research always is it's always going to be college students, and this is how they tend to behave. Like your point to the age is exactly right. Like they're
Yeah.
just sort of a priori, defined. I just would like so much like like these bar charts and these pie charts of gender. I don't ever know what to do with them. Am I supposed to? Oh, look at all the women playing Call of Duty. Now where do I go? Do I? What's the
Yeah.
actionable
I
insight
mean,
here?
I mean, yeah, for me it's like I want to look at like shifts in gameplay practices across regions,
Hmm.
right? And so particularly platform preference, streaming preferences, what kinds of apps are they actually using? If they're from specific places, and to what extent are those kind of geographic preferences traveling with them to the United States, right? So, these are some of my curiosities. But anyway, we should wrap this up. We've gone on too long.
This is only part one.
This is only part one. This is only
On next week,
the
we'll be presenting
iterative
the results.
unpacking of the results. Yeah.
You've done the work. Now wait for the results because you've earned
Yeah.
them.
So, hope everyone enjoys this. we need to pwn and own?
Let's go. Let's be quick about it.
All right. I got a quick own.
Go ahead.
Paolo Pederocchini, better known as Mole Industria, the game designer, professor of game design at the Carnegie Mellon. You know, he has a tremendous body of work. He's got a new game coming out. That's what I'm trying to say. Called Future No Thanks! Exclamation point. Future No Thanks. You can go to futurenothanks.com. It is a game that is kind of played. The premise is you live in a socialist utopia, and you are about to have, you know, consensual euthanasia and spend the day however you want. And I think this is a great, you know, Paolo is kind of probably best known for doing a lot of kind of capitalist exploitation simulators. Like he has done a lot of, you know, his other stuff listed on Steam at least is things like the Democratic Socialism Simulator, the Green New Deal Simulator. But he tends to create kind of simulation type stuff. So seeing this kind of emergent open world narrative work from him seems really fun and cute. And the animation style is really adorable. And yeah, it looks, you know, there's a little trailer out now, and the game is gonna be out. It's release date TBD, but you know, enjoy your last day in a future that works for everyone.
Well, you know, you might not have to wait until the future. Here's my pwn. Chris Hansen, the host of To Catch a Predator, is working on a documentary on Roblox, particularly around this ban for having a YouTuber called Schlep get, you know, basically exiled from the platform, and is now, you know, and he was actively catching, you know, predators in Roblox. Roblox has responded to that in a way that nobody liked, and now we're getting this apparent documentary with Chris Hansen, and it's just, it's such a
you don't think Roblox is gonna bury that in lawsuits or whatever?
Oh, they already are. It's absolutely happening. It's just like, you know, it's okay. Wait, does that mean you're on the side of Roblox?
That means I've decided this mess of a documentary. Yeah.
You know, I have a lot of thoughts on it, but it's just like, I just like talk about transmedia or like, you know, TV adaptations. Like, so To Catch a Predator is now going to be a Roblox infused document that's probably going to be crowdfunded because no one in media land's going to want to touch it. And it has got Chris Hansen. I didn't know that guy was still around. You know, it's like I thought. So it's like, there's so much going on here. It's like it's impossible to not have an emotional reaction to it.
He's steely, but he's old now. He looks rough.
Hey, listen, you know, the predator lifestyle is not for the faint of
Wow. Skin. He wrote a book called Protecting Your Kids from Online Enemies Already in Your Home. That is such an intense subtitle.
So I'm leaning towards pwn on this one. So like, I'm not sure that this is going to be.
No, I mean, it's like, is it going to be messy and problematic? Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah. But do I love anything that rattles Roblox? Bring it. Bring it.
Listen, I'm a dad. Go
keep their PR team on their toes, you know?
They're on their toes, I'm sure. There's plenty of journalists that we know and love that, you know, keep them there, but it's the reemergence of this Chris Hayes. I remember watching that show. Why are you here? And then it's like some trucker from Alabama trying to meet a 30-year-old. And he's just like, oh Lord, we're bringing that energy back. It's like, I don't want this. I really don't want this. Anyways.
All right, amazing. Well, that's a great roundup, and we are ending just in time to be able to run off and catch our subway rides to all meet up in Brooklyn. So we're going to go have a drink at the end of this extra long episode, which Keaton will expertly cut down for us. And yeah, join us next week for the answers to all of our hot questions and to know exactly how many students come from the United States. All right, with that, good night and good game.